I seen your father's name, and I forgot all about you. Supposed to call me.
Yeah, no, you're fine. You're fine. So, just to start out, I just need like verbal consent that like you are okay with me conducting this interview with you, using this information in a project. You are consenting to being recorded for the purposes of this project, conducting information.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Because it's a little difficult to get a physical slip of paper to you with everything and me not being home for so long. So I'm going to just take this as the consent form.
Yes.
But basically, we can start wherever you want to. If you want to start talking about, your birthplace, your family, kind of just like the progression of your life story. So wherever you want to go, basically just start talking, recanting your own past and stuff, and I can direct from there if you maybe get like lost or you like can't find anything else to talk about and you need like a suggestion or anything like that. But the floor is essentially yours for me to like sit and listen and hear what you have to say about your experience as like an American woman.
Oh, well, I was born in Casey County, and then we went to Cincinnati. Lived up there a couple of years, and this is sort of funny in a way, but not, I guess. Mom took Harvey to kindergarten, and I followed her. I got up on the street, and some old lady hollered at me, "This kid is lost. The cops got me." Yeah, I just barely remember this. They give me ice cream. I didn't know. But anyway, we came back to the farm. I grew up on the farm, uh, doing all the farm chores, milking the cows, working in the field, cooking, canning, going to school. And then when I got out of grade school and went to Liberty High School, I thought I had really expanded out in the world. Because when we was on the farm, we didn't go anywhere hardly except church and visiting friends.
Mm-hmm.
There was
So,
a need.
sorry. So church was like your escapism outside of like just daily work pretty much until you got to high school?
Yes, we went to school. One room schoolhouse with 20 kids in all 8 grades. So there wasn't a whole lot of. Me and my Harvey played mostly by ourselves. We had a couple of cousins that lived close. We played with them some. But I always thought it was a neat thing that the country people did. See, we didn't have phones. We had a radio.
Hmm.
If you'd go to somebody's house and they was not home, of course everybody burnt wood. You stacked wood up in front of their front doors to let them know somebody had been there.
So just like as a
Then
gift or
to tell you that you had company and you wasn't there. You had guests.
okay, so basically it's like you would find the wood and then be like have to like figure out who it was or
Yeah, you had to figure out who it was
ah, okay.
because everybody had a wood pile
Yeah.
where they cut wood. You know was that was our heat
Mhm.
and your food and everything. So that was sort of funny. I don't know when they stopped that, but something else they used to do. This was they put a wreath on somebody's door that had died. That was telling everybody that passed by somebody died at this. And they usually knew who it was then.
Mhm.
The way this word got passed around on what was going on, we had a country store about a half mile down the road. And most everybody were farmers, so they was working in the fields. And if somebody knew something, they would stop when they seen the man or whoever was working in the field, and they would tell them what was going on. Or you found out at the country store.
Okay. So just a lot of communication through like word of mouth and
Word of mouth, and there was always somebody out working in the field or something, because everybody was farmers.
mhm.
It wasn't nothing unusual to go down the road and see somebody throw up your hand. Hi.
So did you hear about a lot of like big events through the radio, or would it have been like newspapers, stuff like that, like events outside of your own community? Or is that something that you didn't even really hear about much?
No, no, not really. The first time I heard about the Iron Curtain
Hmm.
was in school. And my version of an Iron Curtain was literally a piece of iron steel standing up as a house, I mean, as a fence, I guess.
Yeah.
I didn't understand what curtain meant. I know it was keep people in. And I remember that, and I was going home and I think, And then the first thing I heard about the Communist Party, there was a couple they arrested for being communists, and they executed them. There's a man and his wife. That literally made me sick.
Hmm.
We were stripping tobacco in the wintertime, which is a cold, cold job standing in a barn in the wintertime. But, they just, well, you hear the singing or preaching on the radio, but when I got older, I used to listen to Opryland out of Tennessee. That was, the kind of music was country.
Hmm.
So we just didn't know much about what was going on outside of our neighborhood. Uh, I can remember some of the teenage boys getting killed in car wrecks, that we knew.
Hmm.
And that was always very upsetting. Uh, you know how it is when you go to a youth camp, you don't know what's going on in the outside world till you come out.
Yeah.
And when I went to Liberty, which is a small town, only had one stoplight. I thought I was really moving up in the world.
Yeah.
So we went on one vacation when I was a kid. We went to Lebanon, Indiana, to one of mom's sisters
Hmm.
in a black pickup truck. There were seven of us. Harvey rode in the back end of the truck. The first time I seen a train to remember is when I come through Louisville, because we had to go across the old Kennedy Bridge, the old Second Street Bridge. And, we didn't get out much. Mom had three brothers that lived in Cincinnati, and that was always a big deal when they came to visit. It was like another world. I went home with one of them one time and stayed about a month, and then come back home with another one, my aunt, and taking a girl into the big city. That was an experience, and I was so nervous because it seemed like I was always doing the wrong thing. I didn't know how to
Yeah.
act, not being different. I mean, it was.
About how old were you, would you say, whenever you went to Cincinnati for a month?
That was I was still in grade school, so that must have been around 10 or 12.
Okay. Is there anything like any significant like things that stick out to you in terms of like difference between life in like Casey County and back home and then like being in such a huge city? Because I know you said seeing a train in Louisville was like the first time you had like seen a train in your life. So it's like, is there anything in Cincinnati particular about like the lifestyle or anything that you saw and you were like, oh, this is different. Like this is crazy.
My aunt took me to the amusement park, and I can't remember the name of it. And I went to all three of them, and then there was an aunt lived up there, and I came back with her, and I just went from the house, and each house was different. Uh, they took me around, and I don't remember, doing other than just going around. I don't remember too much about the city other than the time we went to the amusement park, and I don't remember what it was. I remember Aunt Alice asking me if I was going to dress up, and I said I'm already dressed. Evidently, I didn't have the right clothes.
Mm,
But then we went visit. They took us around. Cousin that, and they didn't have. They had all mom's brothers only had one child each, and they were all younger than me. And no, Uncle Charles's daughter was older than me. She was married. So there just wasn't, I didn't have nobody to play with. I just
yeah.
had adults. And Betty Lois, Aunt Murdy's daughter, she was married too. Forgot about them. But I remember going to the dime store. Aunt Murdy took me over there, buying some trinkets and things. I thought that was exciting.
Hmm.
It was some ways disappointing. I went home with Uncle Ed and Aunt Alice, and we stopped somewhere to eat. They're ordering the dinner, and they said, "Well, if you're not going to eat it, don't order it." Well, I was used to, being on the table. You ate it. I
Hmm.
wasn't used to being. Well, that was probably been the first time I was ever out to eat like that.
Yeah.
Because even when I was in high school, they had little old hamburger joints. Well, they had one restaurant that was sit down, you know. But that sort of upset me, and I thought, ooh. Then I was having her clean up the kitchen, and I did that the wrong way. I poured some juice outside, and she said, "No, that'll create ants." So anyway, started high school and started dating, and I had met, I had seen Jimmy at church. I knew who he was, and Daddy and them knew him because he worked for this place that delivered fertilizing stuff. Yeah, and so I come out of the theater one night. We did have a theater and a drive-in too.
Mm.
And Jimmy was sitting across the street and he hollered at me. And I can still see that smile and sparkle in his eyes. And I guess that's what set the story. I don't know. But anyway, we got married and came to Louisville when I was one of my biggest mistakes that I made. I went to the junior year and I didn't go back to my senior year. I got married.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't go back and redo that. I got married and come to Louisville with him. You talk about a green country girl coming out of the sticks. I know you hear Jimmy calling about his family that
Mm-hmm.
lived here in Louisville. They were on the rough side, drinking, cussing, fighting. First drunk woman I ever seen was one of his cousins.
Mm-hmm.
And he later told me, he says, I thought everybody lived that way. Well, I didn't grow up with drunks and fighting. He did. His whole family about it were moonshiners, bootleggers. They made it and sold it. See it? His grandfather killed a man, shot him in the back, then turned out to be a preacher.
Wait, so the person who was killed was a preacher, or
The killer.
so his grand?
Later on, Jimmy had two grandfathers. What both of them were drank and carried on, and they wasn't either one of them. And then after the one that they got into a fight using guns. Some of the stories sound like the Wild Wild West to me.
Yeah.
And this man shot at him, and he took after him. He run in this store, and he run in, and as he went through the door, Mr. Hale shot him, and it went through the door and went through him and went through the door.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know when his conversion was, but later he became a preacher.
Interesting.
Well, his mother, the story's always been told that one of Jimmy's uncles married a Cherokee down in North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
And they came up here to get away from the Trail of Tears. Had 6 kids. He died, man. And because she was an Indian, they took the kids away from her. So the kids went different places. And this one, Jimmy's grandfather was who raised him was an uncle, I think. And he was mean to him, so he turned out to be mean too.
So this was Jimmy's parents, or
It was Jimmy's grandfather and
okay,
both of his mother's father and his father's father. But
okay.
anyway, that's Jimmy's life, not mine. But anyway, uh, that was really a shock. And then uh, Uncle Sam called Jimmy into service. That's when they drafted you.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to beauty school. And when I got out, I went back to the country and stayed there until they found out about him bleeding. They didn't want him then. So we lived up there for about a year. So Sheila was born up there, and General Electric was on a big strike.
So around what time would you say that this was all happening, like the drafting and General Electric and having Sheila?
Well, the drafting was, let's see, 1960.
Mm-hmm.
We got married in 59. Sheila was born 61. 60 or 61? 60, I guess.
Hmm.
No, well, no, that ain't right. 61. So when GE went back to work, we come back down here, and Sheila was baby before we come back down here. I went to church with Chris and Claudia one night, and I renewed up. So then we moved back to Louisville. I got in. Have you heard them talk about Wheeler Davis from the Louisville church?
A little bit, not much. I've heard the name, but
Judy Davis, Glenn Davis, uh, well, you know Penny Davis, but I don't remember. They go to Knopp Avenue, Penny and let's
mm,
see, Kathy and Rhonda. Well, anyway, Wheeler Davis was a distant relative of my father. And I found out Daddy, between all the communications between Daddy, we found out, and I started going over to Little Church.
hmm.
And then I finally got Jimmy to go with me, and then he renewed up, and let's see, he was going to church when Shirley was born, 64. And then he announced his call to preach. I thought it went all the way down to the floor when he told me that. And he wanted to talk to Brother Gleason Bloyd. You know him,
Hmm.
because he was our pastor. So we went over there, and that was rough. Him starting preaching and trying to go in different churches, and dragging the kids here and there. And I don't know. It's just through the years of meeting a lot of people, met a lot of people that are still friends with, and met a lot of them that's not. They're gone, which was good. You met different people from different associations, different churches. That was good.
Yeah.
I missed that part of meeting people, and some, that's good and bad, and everything. But there was a lot of joy in it.
So this was
And
all when Jimmy first became a preacher.
yeah,
So
when he started.
for you personally, did you find it like did
Mm,
you struggle with being a preacher's wife or
yes, very much so. I wanted to be the perfect preacher's wife.
mhm.
They don't exist.
Yeah.
Took me a while to figure that out, but they
Uh-huh.
don't exist. You wanted to be, yeah, well, you go somewhere and they didn't have no piano players, so I took piano lessons, and you know how I struggled with that. Uh, Tried to do things. So I quit working, give up my beautician, working as a beautician, because I wanted to go with him to support him, because a lot of the things were weekends, and I thought that was what I was supposed to do. Yeah, I had a lot of nerve problems over that. A lot of guilt of not being the perfect preacher's wife.
Yeah.
And the preacher's kids is supposed to be perfect kids. And that affected the kids. And I left my kids a lot to go with him to church, which I regret. Sheila and Shirley. especially. Virginia come along, and it was later, and then you're still on the road.
Mm-hmm.
We was didn't get to see much of my family because weekends were always tied up. I went for a whole year without even seeing my sister because we was always at the church somewhere. Especially when he had pastored that one in Greene County, it was 70 miles one way.
Mm.
And we did that every Sunday for 6 years.
So you were living in Louisville, driving to Greene County every Sunday for preaching.
Yeah.
That's a lot. That's a lot of
Yeah,
ground to
and
cover.
Rebecca missed her friends at school. I mean, at church, at Bible school. Sunday school,
Mm-hmm.
crying, and take them into another group. And then when we went down there, Sheila and Shirley was teens, and they quit going to church with us because they were doing jobs and in high school, and you know how that goes. And
Mm-hmm.
that was rough.
So you found it difficult to balance being, like the maternal figure in the family, and then also being this like spiritual maternal figure in a way.
At church
Yeah.
because she was the preacher's wife,
Mm-hmm.
which you have seen a lot of things, heard a lot of things, good and bad, which affects your kids because they've seen and heard that too. And then let's see, Shirley got married. Then Sheila got married and went to Florida. And then she calls me one day and tells me that I can't think of his name now. He wanted a divorce.
Mm-hmm.
And that was very hard. He went to the bank and pulled all of the money out. She hadn't put her name on the bank account. She was working, putting her check in the bank. He had a little girl, and he told Sheila if she would have been living in an apartment, she'd have to pay for the apartment. So he was charging her for living with him for a year, I guess. Said she should have charged him for a year's babysitting too.
Yeah.
What's funny here, I knew he would do it. About 5 or 6 years ago, he emailed Sheila, got a hold of her email, wanted to know if she had his class ring. No, I pawned it for her.
Yeah. As you should have. He can't, if he was the one doing all that and wanting to charge her to stay with him in what, Florida? That's what he deserves about, I'd say.
Yeah, and well, she didn't have no money and no place to go.
Mm-hmm.
She's working at Walgreens, and the pharmacist says, "Well, you can live with me." Can you imagine having a child and they're that way far and no place to go, no place to live?
Yeah, I can imagine how hard
She
that
lived with him for a week afterwards. And Jimmy, and then the lawyer she had for the divorce, he told her she wouldn't win because of the judge that she had. And he got everything. And I always thought it was funny. He connected up with his first wife.
Mm-hmm.
She had a car wreck after he got rid of Sheila. She told the cops her name was Sheila Lobb. So I don't know. I guess he lost money on that deal. I don't know.
Hmm.
And then that was hard, and Jimmy had to go down there and get her, and you know, and then Shirley Doug goes to Florida, and she has 2 kids. And we were running back and forth, which was good. As Lorraine Perkins said, that took excuse to go to Florida then.
Yeah. It works out.
Yeah, it was always nice. And then I finally got to where I was, I guess, so nervous, I don't know. Grew out of it, and it is changing churches, changing people, changing friends, your kids changing. Of course, Calvary Hill was the last one, and of course, Lou and Rebecca's been buddies ever since.
Mm-hmm.
And your mother, we met at Carl Ridge when your mother was a little girl, and then all at once Eller disappeared. She didn't come back for a long time. When she come back, she had Michael.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you ever heard that when you got pregnant. When I was a kid, you didn't go out in the public. You stayed home.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Why would you say like that was a cultural staple? Like, why do you think that was like the norm accepted to do that?
I don't know. I never did hear the explanation for that, other than like it was dirty or it wasn't good. Or I remember one of our neighbors had 11 kids, and every time you'd see Adele at church, and then you wouldn't see Adele, and you knew she was pregnant.
Yeah. Did,
So then, between being pregnant is the only time you saw her.
so did you ever do that, or did you not care and you're just like, I'm pregnant, but I have stuff to do? Like, did you go out in the public while you were pregnant, or did you also do the same
Yeah,
thing?
I can remember when I was a kid seeing these women with a whole bunch of little kids hanging on to them, and they looked like they were half dead.
Yeah.
All the energy was gone out of them.
Yeah.
Now that has stuck in my head all these years, of these pitiful women, and they'd show up at church. That's where I seen them, with 4 or 5 little kids, and I didn't want that. I didn't want to be that.
Yeah. So you did you also kind of conceal your pregnancies, or did you?
No, I went out with mine.
Okay, cool.
Wore them 2-piece outfits.
Yeah.
Uh, what I thought was funny, one Saturday we was with my mother-in-law in Liberty, and there was a lady getting out of the car or getting in the car or whatever. Anyway, she was pregnant. I would say probably 8 or 9 months. And Miss Hale said, "She looks like she's ready to go to bed." Country people, I don't know how much time you spent in the country with your ancestors, your aunts, cousins, and whatever,
Hmm.
but it was a lot different.
So would you say that by you still going into the public and like showing that you were pregnant to other people, would you say that that was seen as like scandalous or like an act of rebellion or anything, or it was just you decided I don't care and you just did it?
I just didn't do it. I don't know why, I just didn't do it. I guess that was, me as personal. I'm very, I don't know what the word for me is, but I always had my opinions. And I never did want to wait on a man like the old women did. And my mother-in-law used to, she did, and she raised her girls that way.
Mm-hmm.
Three of them. Well, me and my oldest brother, me and him argued all the time because he wanted me to wait on him and I would not. He wanted to be the boss, and I didn't boss very good.
Yeah.
Can you imagine that?
No.
Uh, it's like, as you know, there's some of the preachers I like to cut up and carry on and aggravate. Some of them I don't bother.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it's just, I'm always teasing Brother Gary used to about letting me preach.
Yeah.
Well, the, every preacher's wife that I know could probably preach.
Mm-hmm.
Believe me, they could.
I don't doubt it, honestly.
Yeah. And Jimmy always said I was his worst critic.
Yeah. Give him
Oh,
constructive criticism.
yeah, I tried to be, but he probably didn't take it that way.
Mm-hmm.
I used to say, they don't want to hear that. That don't have nothing to do with them people. But anyway, me and him, we agreed and disagreed. And that's life. You agree and you disagree.
Mm-hmm.
But you live together for 63 years. You love one another. And then sometimes you're so mad at one another you can wring their necks, I guess.
Yeah. So, would you say that you were more kind of like independent minded, at least in terms of like, you know, not letting men, I guess, like tell you what to do through your life?
Oh, very much so. I never did like that.
Yeah.
Even as a child, I can remember as the rooster and the hen. I wasn't the abiding, humble little old lady
Yeah.
or young lady or whatever. I remember there was a couple up. This was after I'd been married for years, and they had a whole bunch of kids, and she was one that always looked like she was wore out. And she was one that jumped every time he hollered. And she was wanting to go home, and she wouldn't go out. Men always sit out in the yard in the summertime. And I was tempted to go to the door and holler at him to tell him that his wife wanted to go home with the kids.
Mm-hmm.
She wouldn't even feed the kids until he come in from the field.
Really?
And I had a great uncle that was mean to his wife, and I smarted off at him all the time until he got to taking it out on her, and so I shut up as being a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
I was always sort of rebellious, I guess. And I thought I was odd and different from a lot of people, but the older I got, the more I found out there was other people, women out there the same way. I didn't want to be dominated by some man, and I didn't want to wait on a man if he was sick. I would do that, in which I did with Jimmy. I took care of him best I could. But when he wasn't sick, I didn't see any. What makes them any better just because they're a man? What makes them any better than a woman?
Yeah.
It's like they were superior. It's been that way for generations and generations. The man likes to take authority and tell you what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And they also like to take advantage of you, too. And I mean, history says when the first Christians started putting churches together, they had church in a house,
Mm-hmm.
in homes. Well, that was one thing the woman was in charge of. If she wasn't, didn't have the rights for anything else, was the house. And then they decided to take it out of the house and have a separate building. So then the women lost their control there.
So I know, I knew, I've only known you and Jimmy in like the latter halves of your lives because I've only been around so long. But
They better,
would you say that whenever you all got married or like started dating and stuff, that this mindset of yours, like, was that ever a problem between you two with you not like seeing yourself as being submissive to men, or was he always like receptive to that and understanding like that you were going to do your own thing and he.
I guess he was understanding because we had that discussion before we ever got married
Mhm.
about the way I felt about things,
Yeah.
about being bossed,
Yeah. So
telling me
you pretty much
I
told him straight up. You were like, "This is how it's gonna be."
I told him one time that if I died, I'd have to get up out of the coffin and tell him what to do. So I guess I've always been sort of what do you call it, assertive.
Hmm.
I think my kids, girls, are that way too.
Yeah, I can see that.
You can see that in them. They just say, well, I think Shirley would buck more than I do, but I have bucked them, and in the church and the things that they've done, I've seen so much politics,
Hmm.
which should not be if they believe the Bible, but they do anyhow.
Is that shift towards like politics being more involved in sermons and church services? Was that is that something that's always been there in your experience with church, or would you say it's gotten worse over like time?
Probably worse. It's like when they go to the association, the rules. It's when they're not worshiping, it's when all this other stuff. They're electing officers and they're electing this person and that person just because they agree with them or they. If you're the president, you can to form a committee. You can pick the ones that you know will go with you and ones that won't.
Hmm.
Uh, so I've had a couple of rounds with some of the preachers. So can you imagine that?
So, did you find more like-minded women that also were more like assertive back at home or like in Louisville?
No, my mother was. She was sort of assertive to a certain degree, and some of the stories that I heard that. Oh, hang on just a minute.
Yeah,
Let
that's
me tell
fine.
you.
You're good.
Shirley, I got a job right now. I'll call you back later. Is that okay? Okay, bye. Got a job. Now I lost my train of thought. But it's like several years ago at Association, one of our preachers, when all this started with the gays, your professor probably won't like that, but anyway, he got up and made a notion that the women didn't wouldn't have the shouldn't be able to speak in business.
Hmm.
And then he wanted to hook on that we wouldn't allow business gays to join our churches.
Hmm.
Well, you know what I done?
Can imagine.
I got on the floor, and the very idea. Jimmy was on second shift, and me and Brenda Bazaar went to church one Wednesday night, and there was no men there except one that I had never seen there was a member. One just got out of an alcohol institution, and I didn't feel like neither one of them was qualified to lead the service, and so me and Brenda had church.
Mm-hmm.
And besides, I don't like being hooked in with the gays either.
Mm-hmm.
And sit down. And one of the old deacons from Friendship said he agreed with me. But the thing of it is, some of our churches don't recognize the women speaking up in business. That irritates me.
So
And the women
they,
in some of ours dress like the men want some, long hair and all that stuff. And
yeah,
no makeup, no. Well, you've been in it long enough, you know that.
yeah. Certain denominations are more super conservative than others and stuff like
But
that.
they control the women.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like Afghanistan and all of them countries, the Muslims, whatever you pronounce them.
Yeah, where they tell the women how they should dress and
Yeah,
according to
well,
them.
we got denominations here that do that.
Mm-hmm.
That makes me very angry.
Yeah.
I'll tell you a funny one over, when women was fighting to be able to vote in the United States. And that was during the World War II when they was freeing the Jews from Hitler.
Mm-hmm.
This one lady, she knew the president because she'd been there several times trying to get him to put this bill in effect. He liked to go out in the Potomac River and get in the water nude. So she followed him one day. Guess what? He left his clothes laying on the shore.
Mm-hmm.
Guess what she did?
Took them.
She took She hollered at him and she told him what she wanted. Nah, and she says, "Hello, he's out here naked." I forgot which one it was that signed that law. He agreed to it, and she gave him back his clothes, and he signed it.
Yeah.
I thought that was funny. But all the suffrage that women had to go through with to be able to vote. Well, my mother-in-law didn't think that a woman should vote.
Mm.
My mother didn't vote because Daddy was a Republican and she was registered as a Democrat. So that was things that were embedded in women during the Civil War. What was going on? A woman couldn't wear short hair when she got married. She had to wear it a certain way. After you got married, you could not wear bright clothes. You only wore browns or blacks.
Mm-hmm. Sounds boring.
Well, that sounds angry to me.
Yeah.
How did they had it so set up for thousands and thousands of years to it's like I'm reading a history book uh, that Rebecca gave me. And some of the things I don't understand in the Bible, like women concubines, uh, when Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed, Noah was going to give his girls to these men that were wanting them in.
Mm-hmm.
Why? I don't understand that.
So, have you ever had any like? Because you were raised like in church and stuff, correct? So you've always kind of had religion as a part of your life.
Yes.
Would you say that has there been any times that your convictions about like women having like more equal status, would you say that that has caused you like problems with your own faith?
Yeah, that's caused me with, you couldn't wear dresses. Or you're supposed to wear this, you're supposed to wear that. You're not supposed to wait, whatever the man, I used to say, Mom, well, the men, boys can do that. Why can't I do it? No, you can't do that. These men talk nasty when you get out.
Mm-hmm.
But I was just, I don't know. I always had that assertiveness that it made me angry that I was just as important as my brother was, not just because he was a man. It's like he couldn't go to the field to work unless Barbara went with him. He couldn't go to the barn to milk the cows unless Barbara went. You know, so of course, back then the men were still on the say so.
Mm-hmm.
During the biblical times, they wouldn't take a woman's testimony in court system
Mm-hmm.
unless there was two or three, or it had to be a man to prove that they were telling the truth.
Yeah.
If you remember, Christ dealt with a lot of the women. Who was the first person? Who was the first people that Christ seen when he rose from the grave?
There's his mother and like two other women.
Yeah. Mary Magdalene and Mary's. Yeah, I asked my father that one time. I said, "Who?" I'll tell you something else I did to my father. To we was in association in Russell County. This preacher preached on Judas and Jezebel.
Mm-hmm.
The deacons used to all sit together, and the women sit out in the audience. Well, anyway, when he got on Jezebel, these men, amen, and amen, and amen, and amen. And when he got to Judas, I didn't even hear one man, amen.
Mm.
My father was sitting there, and I said, "Why didn't you say amen?" He never did answer me.
Couldn't have a good enough answer, honestly. Probably. It's just.
Yeah, but it is like, and it's like the woman that caught in adultery. You can't commit adultery by yourself.
Exactly. Exactly.
And I always thought one of those guys that were standing there was probably the man.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's my opinion. I ain't got no proof of that.
I mean, I would believe it, honestly. Because it's.
I mean, that is dumb.
Mm-hmm.
Even Christ knew that.
Yeah.
You cannot
That's why he said.
get it all. And it's just the same thing with the prostitutes and the Johns. Guess who the cops went after?
The
The
prostitute.
women. Well, that poor old guy. It's not right. The way I always look, I heard it when I was growing up. It's not exactly right, but it's not exactly wrong. Come around. I'm talking to Tori. Oh, okay. I'm interviewing. She's going to shoot me. Uh,
You're fine.
but, it was always the women, these poor men. I've heard it quote, well, if they can't get it at home, they'll go somewhere else. Like that made it right.
Yeah, exactly. And then if they're getting it somewhere else, and the women from somewhere else are the ones that are wrong, even though the men are seeking them out.
Well, when a woman would die, I mean, the husband would die, she had no way of making a living
Mm-hmm.
working on a farm.
Yeah.
These good old guys, they couldn't resist. They had to go help her. They was helping her. They was just piling more misery on her.
Yeah.
They took advantage of her. you know, one of Jimmy's sisters that her husband died, and she ran into this guy that she knew there at Walmart. He said he had a wife. He said, "I'm coming over to see you one of these days," and she said, "You're not coming over to see me." Now, what did that mean?
Yeah, he's. She knew what intentions he had.
Yeah, really.
He's the fact. It kills me that the what's the word I'm looking for? The confidence that he would have to do that in the first place. Like,
It just well, the men's like the rooster in the hen house that runs around crowing and spurting like he's important
yeah,
just because he's a man. When it makes me sound like I hate all men, but I don't.
hmm you understand that there's an you don't understand why there'd be an unbalance between them.
Yeah. What is it okay? Not really, but it ain't really wrong for him to fool around with another woman and being married and a family. But it's strictly not okay for her. She's the bad one.
Yeah.
Now why is that?
So because you have these ideas and you've always had them, were there any like movements in particular, like in the grand scheme of like maybe like Kentucky or like the whole country, like women's movements that you ever noticed or like you thought you're at least like you heard about it and like thought to yourself like, okay, I can see why they would be doing that or
Yeah, the lib women's lib several years ago. That was before you was born. It came out, and I agreed with a lot of things, and some of them I didn't agree. I didn't agree with the abortion, but I agreed with a lot of the other things.
mm-hmm.
And my father, he'd come down here and I'd take him to the store, and he'd always go, clerks is usually women. And he'd always pop off, "What do you think about this women's lib?" I expected him to get slapped one day. He knew how I felt about it, but
So you agreed with some of what they were saying. Did you ever like consider joining
joining them,
them or were you like that's too far?
no, no, I was, I was the preacher's wife.
So
I had
you had to maintain that
the
image.
the religious part of it. I had, you know,
So, did you think do you feel like your spirituality prevented you in some ways from becoming more involved in these movements or do you think that it was a good trade-off because you said you had to forfeit being a cosmetologist to go with Jimmy when he was like preaching and stuff. Do you feel like, the payoff from having that more like spiritual existence in like your life, do you think that was worth giving up these other things that like you could have maybe done instead, like, stay being a cosmetologist or like joining a movement like that, like a women's movement, because you were trying to maintain this like perfect preacher's wife image.
yeah, I've debated on that a lot, Tori, over the years. I've always, that was like being between a rock and a hard place.
Mm-hmm.
The other one out ruled I couldn't give up God and I couldn't give up not supporting Jimmy. So I had a hard bill over that. Now it don't, it's at my age now, it's not important. I mean, that I don't guess you say I really regret to a certain degree, and a certain degree I do, that God was more important.
Mm-hmm.
and I thought I had to be the perfect preacher's wife. And after we quit pastoring church, I wasn't the pastor's wife anymore. And Angie Etherington says, "You are." I said, "No, I'm not." That freed me from a lot of responsibility on my shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
That
So,
free. It's like in the church, when it's always, well, what's all preachers' wives don't do this. They come to the preacher's wife, do this, or whatever, blah, 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 blah.
yeah.
And, some of them don't do anything and some do. But I was one that was always doing and trying to be the perfect preacher's wife.
Do you think since you've gotten older and, you know, after Jimmy did stop preaching and you did have that like burden taken off your shoulders, do you think you like had more free time to like express your personal beliefs more and things like that as opposed to like when you were still kind of like stuck in that hard position? Did you take the opportunity to express yourself more since you didn't feel like people were looking at you as the preacher's wife or
Yeah, to a certain degree, but I always expressed my opinions, even though when I was still
mm-hmm.
in the churches. But yeah, there's a big relief different in it. And since he's gone, I'm just a member.
I don't know. I think a lot of people still consider you to have had that like not a part of your identity because you're Barbara above anything else, but I think a lot of people still do have respect for you in regard to that portion of your life, whether or not you feel like it was a good time or not with you being like the traveling preacher's wife. I've heard like a lot of other adults talk about it and they're like, they see you kind of like as this really good example. So even if you feel like it was a rough spot and like you have regrets about it and everything, at least you can like take solace in the fact that from other people's perspectives you were apparently doing a great job and like other people took comfort in like you as like a person and
And
as like
so,
an example. Oh yeah, I've heard like a lot of people say stuff like that.
well, your pastor says I'm the worst member he's got.
I think a lot of those older men, including my dad, just like to give you grief because they know you'll give it back. And that's why they
I
start
know.
stuff.
Being it's like I did your father figure out what I was saying to him last Sunday?
I think so. Yeah, he's mentioned that several times now.
Yeah, I said, you left me. You just went off and left me. And I got to thinking later, well, did that sound very good? I'm always putting my foot in my mouth. And,
You know, he
and
thinks
did he think surely Bill, I don't think, thought I was after him or something or another.
no, no, no. He thinks
I
you're.
sometimes think that when these guys that likes to, I don't know why, is it these men like to aggravate me? Some of them. And I think, well, do they think I'm flirting with them that I want one of them? I asked Jimmy that a long time ago. I said, "Did you think they think that?"
What do you say?
Nah. Uh, but no, your father. I told him it was. I said, well, we can insult each other, and we don't get upset over it.
Mm-hmm.
But your father is a terrific guy. Oh, Jimmy thought so much of Bill.
He's full of it. Is one way of putting it.
Well, that's what's fun about him.
Yeah.
So is our pastor.
Yeah.
He's always got some remark about me.
Mm-hmm.
If he didn't, I think he was mad at me, I guess.
So
Charlie House thinks I'm mean. Jerry Scott, I don't know what he thinks about. I think he thinks I'm nuts.
Nah, I don't think so.
Do you know what I done to him when he started preaching? Charlie brought him up to church to
Mm-mm.
preach. You know, talk about putting your foot in your mouth. I do that so much. He still remembers it. I walked up to him. You know, they had what was two kids, and I said, "Are you sure you want to do this? Be a preacher?" And he was so earnest and so sincere. And he says, "I have no other choice." I said, "Okay." I just checked and turned around and walked all the way.
Probably scared the life out of it.
In a way, it wasn't really a joke.
Mm-hmm.
In a way, do you know what you're getting into?
Yeah. Based off your own personal
He didn't
experience.
know, and I knew he didn't know. I've seen a lot of these young guys jump up and blah, 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 blah. The first storm they have, they gone south.
Mm-hmm.
They have no idea what's in front of them.
So,
I didn't.
do you
When we
think
started out, I didn't.
do you think the key to honestly a good preacher is having like a good wife to kind of like direct and all these other things? Because as much as it's like his calling to preach, like, would you say that you being there for Jimmy and doing all that you did and sacrificing all that you did, would you say that that's why he was able to be so successful? And like other preachers, like now new ones, you think that that's what they need to help them?
Yeah, because of all the traveling around associations and different churches, you learned who was married, and if each time you seen them as a couple,
Mm-hmm.
she was with him, unless there was some, sickness or whatever. But there's one of our preachers, I don't even know his wife, and I've known him for years and years,
Mm-hmm.
and I've seen him, but she don't travel with him much. I always thought that was part of it. You go to pastor church, and I've heard a preacher going one way and the wife going to a different church. That don't. That just don't. It's a partnership when they ordain you as a helper.
So you'd say the man accepting the call to preach is as much like his wife accepting a duty at the same time. Like it's basically like the second he's like, this is what I'm meant to do, and like he has a wife or he gets a wife, like she also is kind of making her own vow in a way.
Yeah. Now the Separate Baptists, when they ordain the minister, they ordain both of them,
Mm-hmm.
the wife too. But if that wife dies and then he marries somebody else, she's hasn't been ordained as his helper, and they leave part of that out.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, it's a shock to her, I'm sure. But usually they're older, how things happen.
Yeah.
But these young couples that are starting out, and these young ladies that are marrying preachers, your family, not as much as your immediate family, but your extended family, gets set back on the back shelf. Because when they have things they want to get together, at a certain time.
Hmm.
Then the church sets something up a certain, and then it winds up on the same time.
That takes
Guess what goes?
precedence.
Yeah, and I've done that a lot.
Did you have to, was raising your kids, was that something that was solely on your shoulders, or would you say that you had an equal help in Jimmy with that, even though he was like y'all were traveling and everything for church?
Well, it's he worked, and when he wasn't working, he was at church.
Hmm.
Barbara raised the kids.
Yeah.
I was the one that done all the running for Sheila and Shirley, Rebecca. I was the one that did all of that.
Hmm.
He did not do that. He was so devoted to his jobs, the church, being the pastor, and don't know if you comprehend it, but he put everything he had in church.
Hmm.
And I always told him I came second, and he said, "No, you didn't." I said, "I did. I was always felt second to him." Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's
So,
like God was number one and I was second, and I accepted that. I accepted that fact that I was second because I could not come between him and God, even if I hadn't have been the preacher's wife. I could not do that.
so was that still something that caused like personal, like emotional
Oh yeah,
issues with, even though you knew like you're like, okay, well, this is someone's like own spiritual relationship, but like it's still.
it's still, it's like, he was always at church doing something, tearing down, building. He kept something going all the time. Of course, you wouldn't hear when we built the church, and then the parking lot, and back Sunday school room, and everything. He always had a goal, and them trees he's got out there. He always wanted the church. He kept them something moving all the time. When we was at Sand Lick, the church down in Green County, they remodeled that.
Mhm.
When we was at Carr Ridge, he tore the basement out because it was falling in.
Did you did you ever like resent him for that, or did you ever wish that he had more of a bigger part in the like home aspect,
To a
or?
certain degree, I did resent it. Me and Barbara Bloyd used to tell him the next time we married, it wasn't going to be a preacher.
Yeah.
They always said it was going to be marry a drunk. I said, "There's more men. They're not all drunks."
Yeah.
Well, it was a joke, but not really a joke.
Hmm. So
I mean, these women that goes after a preacher just because he's the preacher, he's pastor. Does she know what she's doing?
it's a way bigger commitment than just having that title.
She don't know what she's getting into.
Yeah.
Well, some of them, I don't know.
So
I was always part of his ministry. Well, I figured, I was part of his life. That was my part too.
so and this is kind of a silly question, just growing up around y'all and stuff, but if given the opportunity, would you like change that? Would you wish that he hadn't been a preacher, or would you have still wanted things to be like the same as they were, with him still having that calling, you still filling that role as like preacher's wife?
Well, At first, when he was having such a hard time preaching, I didn't like it. But as over the years he grew and I grew spiritually, and we met a lot of good people, a lot of ministers and their wives,
Mm-hmm.
and we had a lot in common and a lot of fun. Whether most people think it or not, two preachers and their wives can have fun together. Whether people think that or not, or more than two, but I really enjoyed it later, and I miss it.
Yeah.
It's like missing friends that you don't see anymore, that you don't never, and we're older now, and I, there's the traveling's gone, and I have a friend up in Indiana. Her husband died, and her name's Barbara too,
Yeah.
which was weird. But we used to camp together, our campers, and we was Barbara and Gleason too, and here we was, these preachers and their wives, and we had a lot of fun, aggravating one another, and normally, and I always had to answer the men when they got on something, but ask them questions, stir them up.
So, as having all like the experience you have now in life with, being this female who's come from like a small town, you've moved closer to like a city, you're right by Louisville now, and like having the spiritual journey and stuff, do you think that it's a good thing that women are having more like bigger movements and stuff, or do you think like there's limitations that there should be? I don't know if that's like a too broad of a question. Like,
Well, there's certain things that I think women are not really physically able to do,
mm-hmm,
but I think mentally we should be the same. We shouldn't be just because you're a female and I'm a female and the man is a male, our brains are still the same. God gave us both brains,
mm-hmm,
and men does not really understand what women go through with. I know they don't, because we don't understand all of them, because they don't have the cramps that we have all the time. They don't have the mood swings that we do, that we cannot help.
yeah,
And I still sometimes have days that I don't even like myself. And that is a mood. And when you have a baby, your body just goes through a complete unbalance. Just like when you're menstrual periods. Your body goes through this, and you're physically, you cannot help it. It's mentally there. And why do we have to have so much pain? Childbirth is nothing funny about it.
mm-hmm,
It's like, I always said, it's like knocking on death's door. If that baby don't come, something happens, you're gone. Well, I know they say women's been doing it for centuries and centuries. They have.
it doesn't make it any easier.
And when it don't make it any easier, and I wanted children and I got children. And that's something that women, it's something that's in us that has a desire for that baby.
Mm-hmm.
Why
So,
does women just go, when you get around a baby, what do women and girls do.
They get all like
They
wanting
get
to hold
cuddled up.
it and all that.
Yeah. Now Virginia's experiencing that now with the baby, little man I call him.
Mm-hmm.
You know how it feels to cuddle a little one. And I'm sure that's what God made us. We have more emotions and feelings than men do. You know, most women is like Shirley says, Mama Bear comes out in them when you start messing with their children.
Mm-hmm.
Most mothers will, as the old saying, scratch your eyes out if you mess with their child. Where some men can just walk off. How can they just walk off and leave their wife and kids?
Yeah.
When I was growing up, I never seen a man play with his child or have anything to do with the children except one guy, one of our neighbors. They didn't go to the same church we did, but when we'd have revivals, everybody visited. He'd sit in the amen corner with the men's, but he'd usually have one of his grandkids in his lap. None of the other men did. My father did not fool with us, but he did the grandkids. They'd crawl up in his lap, but and my parents, we didn't grow up hugging one another, telling them we loved one another. They didn't do that. Jimmy's family didn't do it either. And that was hard to get used to do it. Now I got so I'm hugging everybody.
Yeah. Do you think that there's just been a generational shift more in terms of like men feeling more
Yeah, you young
allowed to express their emotions and like affection and
men
stuff?
wasn't supposed to cry. Well, now men will cry now, and they don't. People don't pay any attention to it no more than they do a woman crying. You know, whatever's going on. But no, when I was growing up, that was a no-no for a man.
Yeah.
I guess that's the reason they got had the feelings they did because they wasn't allowed to express their emotion. You know, you still got the little girls is always crying. Well, the boys cry when they're little, but when they get bigger, they're not supposed to cry
Mm-hmm.
or hug or anything. It's like when Paul was got about 9 or 10, Rebecca says, "Don't hug Paul in the public. Boys don't like that." Well, if you know Paul, Paul never did stop hugging me,
Yeah.
and he still does. He might hug me half a dozen times when he comes tomorrow before he leaves.
Mm-hmm.
That's Paul. He just
He's not within the same kind of like constraints. He's like more comfortable with himself.
he's comfortable with hugging, and where some boys. I remember Rachel, hugs everybody,
Yeah.
and Chris, Marvin's grandson. Chris, what is his last name?
I don't know. I don't know.
Well, anyway, he come in church one day and he's about 12, I guess. And Rachel met him there at the door and she cupped her hands around his face and kissed him. I thought that kid was going to die.
Yeah.
Embarrassed him to no end. But Rachel,
Mm-hmm.
she makes her rounds at church all the time. But that's just, but
So.
people has, and now you see young guys with their kids out for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
You see them carrying their babies in the little what do they call that thing? The seats they sit in. You have to put them in now.
Strollers.
Yeah, the strollers or whatever. I remember seeing one guy walking down the mall and he had a kid in each hand in the carrier. So I didn't see that when I was a kid. Now I think that's a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
Men never helped with the kids. The women was always supposed to do that, and they did.
Yeah.
Sean, I think you haven't seen little man, but he weighed 6 pounds when they got him. And you know how big Sean is, and he's got big old hands.
Yeah.
He is so tender with that baby, changing his diapers or whatever, with them big old hands. One hand was almost as big as the baby. And he's so big, and the baby, he lays the baby up here, and he just lays there, and it's just amazing. That little feller is laying there just sleeping away and is relaxed, and Sean is there, and the baby's just laying there, all stretched out on his chest, and it's amazing that he's such a big guy, but he is so tender-hearted.
Mm-hmm.
And with that little bitty tiny, first time I seen him, Sean took him out of that little seat. He's so little. And here he had him in these great big old hands, this little bitty. To me, it thrills me to death to see these men caring for their little ones, or caring for their kids, holding them, hugging them, kissing them, or
Mm-hmm.
cuddling them, or whatever. I didn't grow up with that.
Yeah.
I knew they loved me, they took care of me, but you didn't show the emotional. I don't know how that come into effect.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe somebody that's smarter than I am would. Where did that motion, physical, was it because during the pioneers they had so much physical labor?
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have time. It's like my grandmother said, she set to work in her garden. She had a baby, and she set the baby, they all boys wore dresses when they was baby. Set the kid down and set the bedpost on its dress so it couldn't get away and go work in the yard. I mean, in the garden. Now they lock you up for it.
Yeah.
But that's what they had to do.
Mm.
And everything had to be cooked from raw out. Chicken or whatever they brought in to cook a meal.
Yeah. So, how do you view the new kind of like the 21st century age of like feminism, like, these movements to get like equality between men and women more so? How do you personally look at that? Like, what are your opinions?
Well, my opinion, I'm glad that they're sharing the responsibility. The child belongs to both of them.
Mm-hmm.
It's part of each one of them. So it's just, and I like that idea that they do that. I don't like the idea of the man being the dominating force and the woman like a little kitten that's being abused.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I can't get that. I don't know if that's the right answer or not, but
Yeah.
I in some ways, and now my opinion of this divorce business, they say divorce is higher than it's ever been. You know my opinion of that?
Mm.
They don't have to live with an abusive man. They don't have to put up with that. They can make a living by themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Before, they could not make a living. They had to depend on a man to survive.
Yeah. So it's
And then they always had a bunch of kids.
so it's
And that didn't,
natural that now that women do have more of their own independent rights to see those divorce rates because don't have they are able to take care of themselves, whereas back when you were younger, if your husband was abusive, you had to stay with him because you had no other option.
oh, my father's name for that, if you made your bed, you had to lay in it. If you married a guy and he was mean to you, you married him, so now you got to live with it. They wouldn't have, but they expected the women to.
Yeah.
The uncle that I knew that abused my aunt, nobody done anything about it. Everybody in the county knew what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
So now there's help out there. It's maybe not perfect, but there is places out there for women. See, when a woman has kids, it's not that easy just to walk out the door like the man
Mm-hmm.
and let her root hog or die. But it was like divorce in the old age was like the unpardonable sin. And they still, you know, in the church, a lot of that, it's unpardonable sin. But God didn't say it was unpardonable sin.
So, do you think that stigma around divorce, like couples in the church still today, do you think that that needs to be done away with then? That people shouldn't be judging other, like, church members for having a divorce?
No, because you don't know that person until you live with them. You live in the house with them.
Yeah.
It's like Mr. Hale said to me one time about this couple. He knew they separated. He said he knew it wasn't the man's fault. I said, Chris, you don't know that. You wasn't in there living in with them. Oh, I know he was a good guy. He might have been a good guy,
Not a good
but you don't know
husband.
what goes on behind closed doors.
Yeah.
Of course, there's a lot of people wouldn't agree with me on that, I'm sure. But you don't have to live with a guy just because he's mean to you. I had a good man. He was good to me. We didn't agree on everything, but that's normal.
Mm-hmm.
But Jimmy was a very kind person. Even after he got sick, he never did lose that kindness. He could, I guess you say he honored me or he respected me, or however word you want to use it. But I didn't have to worry about Jimmy being mean to me. That I didn't have to worry about.
He
That was
he
never,
treated you like a person and not like subservient. He treated you like you two were on the same level.
yeah, it's like on Sunday, going out and eating, I was still guilty. He said, well, if you stayed home, you're the one that had to do all the cooking.
Mm-hmm.
So he didn't want me to stay home and do all this cooking.
I was gonna say,
I don't know. I don't know whether that's good or not, but
yeah. No, no, no. I get it.
uh, your grandmother would probably kill me when she ever sees this.
Mama.
I know me and hers had them discussions. She agreed with me on a lot on things too. She had a little bit of rebellious in her.
Yeah.
When Melissa's father died, And she didn't date nobody for 9 years.
Mhm.
And then when she learned, cause her and Alton, she didn't even go to the grocery by herself. Alton, they did everything. And that's me. Me and Jimmy done a lot of things. That's hard. But it was funny when she started dating Daryl, and he wanted to mow her yard. She didn't want him to mow her yard, blah, blah, blah. Let him mow it.
So she went from wanting like having
I learned
everything
to
done
do
good.
this, and I don't want to give it up.
Yeah, now
That was her idea.
yeah, now that I've got this like newfound independence because she
Now I
had to
got
do
somebody
it. Now
else.
she doesn't want
I
it
don't want
gone
to give
again.
that up.
Yeah.
And she felt guilty over drawing Social Security, Alton's Social Security.
Mhm.
I told Melissa, I said, Alton would not want you and Melissa and Michael to live down in the slums in the worst place there is to Louisville. He paid that money in for his kids.
Yeah.
No, it's not wrong to draw it.
That don't surprise me. She's kind of bullheaded when she wants to be.
Yeah, but now when Alton died, she bought her a new car. She brought it up to the house and I drove it until her daddy got real sick, and then she had to go to the country to help take care of daddy, and that's when she started driving
Mhm.
by herself. And she might not want me to tell you all that though.
All right. I
But
won't
it
rat you
was
out.
funny. It was pitiful when Alton died for Ella and the kids, and it was. Michael was small. But it was funny after she learned to do all that, she got that job. She learned to mow her grass herself and do everything that you have to do. And then when Daryl comes along and he wants to do things for her, that was so funny. I know, I learned to do this and I want to give it up. Well, let him do it.
Yeah, I can see that. I can
You can see that.
I can definitely see that.
That she was, she had some of that rebellious in her.
Mhm. Uh, I have taken up a lot of your time. I've just realized the sun
Oh,
is
maybe
the sun
I
has gone
rattled too
down.
much.
No, no, no. I've enjoyed getting to talk to you like this. I feel like we've never gotten like the opportunity to really like have a full blown big old discussion like this. Just in passing. I mean, we've talked, but this has been really
You
insightful.
probably know more about me now than a lot of people that
Oh yeah. No.
that, that I have never talked to. I hope I'm not bored. I think since I live with myself and it's like I rattle too much now because I'm by myself.
Yeah.
I just keep talk.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And if you ever need somebody to just sit and talk with, I mean, I ramble all day long. I'll talk to you. Someone who definitely will talk to you all day long is my dad. I mean, he could talk to a brick wall for hours. So like, you've got the
Oh,
kid.
I like your father. I'm always taking up for him
Yeah,
against Melissa. Has he ever told you that?
yeah,
Sunday, Gary was talking to Melissa about something about Bill this and Bill that. I got a hold of it. I said, I'll take up for Bill. Bill's the one that did it. Of course, he just laughed.
Look, if you ever need somebody to ramble to because you feel like rambling that's like in the Kennedy blood is just talking your head off for no reason. So you've got
Oh, I like
resources.
your father. I do. And I like your mother. Don't get that wrong. I love both of them. But Bill, I just like to aggravate him, and he'll aggravate me, and I aggravate your mother too.
Yeah.
I remember one time she come to church. That's before either one of y'all was born, and she was wanting children, pray for her, and then after y'all got here, I don't know how big you was. She was wanting to get rid of it, and I said to her, I'm being a smart aleck. I remember this young girl that used to pray to have children. That was one Sunday night at church. See, I'm mean sometimes. I couldn't resist. I know she wanted children. I know that, and I know what it.
Yeah,
But
I think that's warranted. I was talking to her. I was like, "You seem to really be obsessed with all these other people's grandkids." I was like, "You wouldn't happen to be wanting grandkids anytime soon, are you?" And she was like, "No, I don't need them. They're snotty." Da 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 da. And Dad was in the background. He was like, "She does. She does." And I was like, "Well, Katie's the one who's married, not me." So,
I've known women. I can't wait till I have grandchildren. Blah 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 blah. That's before I had any, and I thought, well, that really wasn't my decision. That's them, and
yeah.
I mean, I love my grandkids. I told my kids when the grandkids got here, they come first and y'all come second now.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know about these great grands. What am I going to do about that?
Yeah.
But grandparents and grandchildren are good for each other. When they're fighting with mommy and daddy, they can come over and they get some relief. Mom and daddy get some relief, and the grandparents love them on and do all that.
Yeah.
It's like the little boy I seen on Facebook or somewhere, Reddit, packed his suitcase and he's going to Mama's house. You know, that's good. I didn't have no grandfathers to speak of, but I had two grandmothers.
Yeah.
And the one that lived with us was special.
Yeah.
She was a good grandmother. Well, listen, I kept you up all night.
Nah, you're good. I've really enjoyed talking to you. Like, again, thank you very much for consenting to let me do this with you, for taking me, like, me calling you on
I
a
hope I was.
Saturday, using your Saturday.
Well, what else if I ain't going nowhere, It's just me. I'd be sitting here by myself, listening to the frogs or trying to find something to do to occupy my brain.
So,
So I will have to think. I mean, Saturday night, and that's nothing special for me. It's just, I hate nights
yeah,
when it's time to go to bed.
I appreciate you talking to me.
I
I
don't,
really do.
I hope I didn't, your professor think I was completely nuts, but
Nah, she won't at all. I think she'll find you a hoot. I don't think there'll be any issues with that. I think there's going to be a lot of stuff she's agreeing with that you've been saying. So,
oh, something else. I just thought of it. The old churches that had two doors in them. I
mm-hmm,
don't know if you've ever seen any of them.
mm-hmm.
You know what they was? Men went in one door, and a woman went in the other door.
Really?
And I asked Jim Lloyd Gleason's father was a minister. I asked him. I said, "Why did you do that?" That was to keep down the lust. Men on one side, the women on the other side. Of course, you can't imagine what my smart aleck mouth asked him
No,
or told him.
I like to hear it though.
It evidently didn't work, or we wouldn't be here now. you know, Melissa, these things pop in my mind, and I think afterwards,
Yeah.
that didn't sound very good. Or how'd that sound? What'd you say that for?
No, I think that's hilarious. I think that was the right answer.
Poor old Jim Lloyd. He was an old guy. I'm sure he was being serious.
Yeah.
Oh well. Listen, I'll let you go.
Yeah, thank you so much
If
for
you need any
talking to
more
me.
being nuts, just call me and I'll do some more crazy things.
Oh, absolutely. I really appreciate this again. Thank you so much.
Oh, if you ever want to have something to occupy your brain,
Mm-hmm.
come when all three of them girls of mine's here and Michael. Sean is as bad as your father and Michael.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you want to come sometime and just observe
Mm-hmm.
how nutty and crazy this house can get, it Shirley says we're all smart alecks, so the whole family.
I'm familiar with that. I got a little bit of that on my side too. So.
Well, you bring your mother and father and come out sometimes, and we'll
Oh,
see how
absolutely.
crazy.
Definitely.
Melissa will probably leave us all. Poor
Well,
Melissa, I love her.
thank you, Barbara. You have a good night.
You did the same.
Take care of
The
yourself.
frogs are hollering.
I'll see you in probably 2 weeks or so. I think that's when I'll be
Yeah.
home. So,
Well, take care if you ever need to want somebody to yak with or know any other of these crazy country people, Logans. I got a lot of them. And my grandmother used to tell crazy things.
I'll let you know if I need it. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Have a good night.
Love you.
Love you.